Well, thanks for the invitation. It's been very, very interesting digging deep into the history of Wood County Parks. A little bit about myself. So I have been the director since 2008 for Wood County Parks and Forestry. I grew up in Vesper. That's where I was born in my family. I'm one of 12 kids, and so like any large family, when I was growing up, a lot of what we did was trying to do things reasonably priced or free. That's better yet. And so growing up in Vesper, it was very, very nice because we were kind of centrally located amongst all of the parks. And I remember really what spurred my interest in natural resources and park operations development really was going out. We spent a lot of time at Northwood County Park. That was our favorite one, but we also went fishing at Dexter County Park, took in some water ski shows at Southwood County Park. So really going as a child, growing up and going to those parks was really something that got me into that field and interested in that field. Today, a couple things before I get going is, number one, I'm not an expert in the field. I'm not a historian by any means, but I do have access to a lot of good material, and that's kind of what I'm going to be presenting today. This first slide here, as you can see, this is a booklet that was put together in 1951, and basically it was a summary at that point of all the happenings since the beginning in 1935. So the Parks Department alone was actually established in 1935 through Wood County Board recommendation and approval. All right, so I'm sure if you're from Wood County, you're probably pretty familiar with where our locations are at. It's pretty small on here, but you can kind of tell on the northern Wood County, we've got 3 properties: Northwood County Park, Powers Bluff County Park, and then a piece of county forest property currently, Richfield 360 is what we call that. And then we have the Dexter County Park, and closer to Wisconsin Rapids, we have Southwood County Park and Nepco Lake County Park as well. And we'll kind of get into the surrounding areas, the greens and the light blues, and that's more the county forest and state forest. And that basically joins in with parks a little bit later down the road here. And so today I have kind of a combination, some just bullet points as far as some historical significant events, as well as some photos that we'll be looking at, some older photos as well as new photos. But how did it begin? So back in 1933, an individual named W.A. Spries, he was the president of the Wood County Conservation League. And I could not find a lot of history on that league or how it was set up or anything like that. But obviously by the name, they were interested in natural resources and conservation and things like that. This individual was kind of the driving force behind putting together a committee and basically looking at providing public parks and public areas for Wood County residents to enjoy. One of his major, I guess, goals was to establish water bodies in Wood County. At that time, there was only one lake, and it was an impoundment, and that was the Nakusa-Edwards, basically Nepco Lake. And the purpose of that was for paper production. They're located obviously on the Wisconsin River, but that water was not the quality that they needed. And so that was the reasoning for damming up Nepco Lake and the 4 Mile Creek and Bloody Run Creek for the purpose of pumping that cleaner and more apt for paper making products and things like that. So that was one of his driving forces, was to establish some water bodies where people could recreate on. So in 1933, Mr. Spries formed a committee, and that committee basically included a civil engineer, a local building engineer and contractor, as well as the local U.S. postman, and he was obviously very intimately familiar with the area. And so originally what their goal was looking at Southwood County area. And they had 2 locations that they were really looking at. One is the current location of Southwood County, Southwood County Park. The other location was actually a few miles to the south on the 10 Mile Creek. The existing park is on 4 Mile Creek. So those are 2 areas that they went out, and this committee, over the next couple years, they went out and surveyed the property, looked at potential for creating a lake and all that good stuff. And so upon unanimous agreement by the Conservation League members, it was recommended from the County Executive Committee, who they've been working with this whole time, that they decided in 1935 they were going to bring this to the entire county board. And so that's where the big meeting happened. Okay, so September 17th, 1935, Wood County Board of Supervisors meeting. So Mr. Spries was one of the presenters at that point. He was very, very passionate about this. There are two other individuals there as well. H.G. Brogan, who was actually representing WPA, Works Progress Administration. And we'll get into that a little bit more. They were kind of a driving force for a lot of the development initially in our park system. And Mr. Henry Ford, representing the Wisconsin State Planning Commission. He was part of that plan proposal as well at the county board meeting. Now just going into a little bit more detail, the plan was sponsored by the Conservation League, and it was for, quote, the creation of a lake, a park, and a recreational area located about 5 miles southeast of city of Wisconsin Rapids in the town of Grand Rapids on the 4 Mile Creek. So that was the location that they settled on as being the most satisfying for that purpose. The intent was not only to develop a park for Wood County, but also to provide employment. And that's where WPA kind of fits into all of this, was really getting Wood County residents back to work, or getting them to work, but also providing a very nice product at the end of that. WPA, and we'll get into a little bit more, but they were instrumental not only in the parks, but also bridges and roadways, and they did a lot of different public projects throughout Wood County. The resolution was passed 46-1, which allowed, and again, this was concentrating on Southwood County Park, but at this committee, it was decided that $6,000 was going to be granted for 2 parks, one in Southwood County and one in Northwood County. And so, again, that was not the plan initially, but that was voted on by a very large county board size. 47 individuals voted on that, so that's a big board. It was then authorized by the Executive Committee of Wood County to acquire the necessary properties for the creation of Wood County Parks. So that was the very beginning and how it all started out. This is just a sign. This is actually on one of our buildings currently. And so Wood County Board of Supervisors created, out of this resolution, they created a 7-member Parks Commission. And this is actually 7 members were appointed by the county board chairman. A little different than it is today, and I'll kind of get into that, but that's how it initially was set up. And Ben Hanneman of the town of Grand Rapids was the first chairman for that commission. Mr. Spries, who we talked about, was kind of the instigator behind all of this stuff. He served as secretary initially on that commission. So the first park I'm going to kind of get into a little more detail is Northwood County Park. Some people around here still refer to it as Richfield. We get a lot of phone calls still for people that want to camp at Richfield, so we have to kind of figure out what they're talking about. But this is a current map, and as most of you already know, I'm sure, from being from this area, is the Yellow River is basically the water body that goes through Northwood County Park. And we'll get into the 2 dam structures and the lakes, termed lakes, but they are obviously quite small. They're just dammed up, bigger dammed up properties. Northwood County Park also, so when they started looking at different locations for the park, they actually had a different location in mind, and that was about 2 miles north of the existing park. And so that would come out to, Northwood County Park is here. It's a little closer to the intersection of A and N, a little bit to the west where the Yellow River crosses. Unfortunately, they were unable to do enough, I guess, land discussion as far as acquisition with those property owners, and so they did settle on the current location. So that was actually option number 2 for this commission. So like I said, we've got 2 dam structures. This is the upper dam, and so if you're familiar with the property, the swinging bridge or the pedestrian bridge is kind of to the north here. But this is Lake Conowinnie. And the lower dam on the southern portion of the property is impounding a lake called Lake Manakiki. And so I can't say that I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that's how I'm going to pronounce them tonight. So, how did these lakes become the names that they got? Basically, the commission held a naming contest. And so third place for these two dams were Kunu and Hinu was the third place option. Second place was Lee and Ella. And first place was Kanawini and Manakiki. Those in Chippewa language meaning Yellow River and Maple Forest. And so those were submitted by R.J. Henricks of Marshfield. He was the winner. Not sure what he won, but he was the winner. A few significant dates as far as Northwood County Park. 1941 to 44, Mr. Earl Wallace was the first park superintendent that was hired. And so this commission was in place for a good 5 to 6 years before they even hired someone to kind of oversee a lot of the projects that were going to be done here. As I mentioned, WPA, Works Progress Administration, nationwide that ran from 1935 to 1943. It was part of the New Deal through FDR, one of the different programs that they had, and in all, in excess of 8.5 million workers completed and worked on over 1.4 million public projects nationwide. So very large scale, and obviously you can still see the benefits of those projects today, especially within our park system. This is probably a familiar sight for some of you. This is the Northwood County Park Beach House. This was actually the first building within the park that they constructed. You can kind of see maybe 1940 is the date that that was completed. Little bit of history here. This roadway in front of it, it's now blocked off with gates. That used to be actually the main park road that went through it prior to having the roadway closer to the Frisbee Golf course over kind of east of that. And obviously the iconic pedestrian bridge. 225 foot long. At the time, I'm not sure currently if it is, but at the time it was the longest in the state. So not sure if anyone exceeded that past that point, but over the years we have renovated that several times as far as the planking, even the wires and cables. I believe we've replaced those twice since it was first constructed. So there's maintenance involved, but it is people love to go on it, kids like to go on it. It's basically a part of the face of that park. 1950s. First full-time caretaker was hired for Southwood County Park, Northwood County Park, and Powers Bluff. And there was an archery course at Hawthorne Hill, which is the campground area in Northwood County Park. I was unaware of that. Maybe some of you remember that, but I did not know that we had an archery course up there. 1960s, again, W.A. Spry's 1967 was his last year as the Parks Commission Secretary. So he held that position for over 32 years. So he saw Northwood County Park, Southwood County Park, and even the beginning of Dexter County Park. So, and Powers Bluff. So he was very instrumental in our 4 main parks that we have today. 1960s, the northern entrance road property was purchased. Prior to that, over by the lower dam, that was the only entrance into the park. So it was kind of a in and out location. And so that was purchased. 1969, Emil Mueller retires as park administrator, a position he held for 25 years. So he was actually the individual that replaced the original parks administrator. He was only there for 4 years. And he actually went on to be the Kentucky Fish and Game Wildlife director for several years after that. So, and 70s and 80s, Parks Commission is replaced with a 5-member Parks Committee, and that's what I had mentioned. So this change, basically, I'm not sure why it occurred, but from going to a commission to a committee, you are going from a county board appointed non-supervisory, non-elected commission to now a county board supervisor filled committee. So it's a 5-person, they have to be county board supervisors, and that's the way it is today as well. We have a different name. We're kind of under a different umbrella now, but it is still a 5-member park committee. 1975, Emil Shire. Emil Shire replaces Al Buckberger as superintendent of parks. 78, emergency exit road right-of-way was purchased. So if you've ever been out there camping, or if you've been out there with high water, you recognize that we have issues with water raising very quickly and not receding very quickly. So that was a need for quite a while, and that 1978 date was a very crucial one for providing access, entrance and exit from the campground side. 1984, Ronald Arndt is named Parks Administrator, and that is the year also where the Wisconsin Conservation Corps, WCC, started working in Wood County parks. I'm not sure when the program started, but that's when Wood County started hosting the program. That's actually where I got my start as well. I was the Wood County supervisor. I had a crew of 5 in 1999, I believe. And what we did with the WCC is we did a lot of things that the old CCC used to do. We did a lot of tree planting, transplanting. We did some fire control, bridge construction, all kinds of different things conservation related. So it was a pretty good program. They did end that a few years ago as far as being under the state umbrella. It was a state-run program. So that is no longer in existence. Okay, 1990s to the present, 91 Parks and Forestry Department combined. So prior to this, all that county forest that you saw in that map originally, that was managed through a separate department, Wood County Forestry Department, and they also worked very closely with the state forestry department. They still do, but in 1991, when some of the different departments were merging, that was one decision that county board made, was that the parks and forestry were going to be under one roof, one office, and have one administrator past that point. 2008, as I mentioned, that's when I was hired as the parks administrator. That's also the year that the Parks Committee merged with the Highway Committee, and so we are currently known as or my oversight committee is currently known as the Highway Infrastructure and Recreation Committee, also known as HIRC. 2010 was a big year. Online camping registration program started, and so that saved a lot of phone calls and office visits and things like that. It started streamlining things. And 2017 was when we relocated our office from the courthouse to the River Block building, which is where we currently are. So just a few other tidbits as far as department-wide. So our next park is Southwood County Park, Lake Wazeecha. Some people just call it Wazeecha. That's in the township of Grand Rapids. And as you can see in the green highlighted area, that's the park boundary. The red is a very nice walk trail that circles the entire lake. Very popular throughout the year. Again, the Parks Commission decided that they're going to hold a naming contest for this lake as well. Third place was 4 Mile Lake. Second place was Sowoko, Southwood County. And the winning name was Lake Wazeecha, meaning Lake of the Land of the Pines. And that winner was James Decora of Wisconsin Rapids. Very similar to Northwood County Park, they kind of developed over the same time period. So when we talk about WPA projects, a lot of these stone buildings, this is the White Sands Beach House. And so other ones would be obviously the Northwood County Beach House that we saw earlier. Some of the outbuildings, the vault buildings that are all stone. And we'll see some of the shelter buildings as well. Very nice. I mean, they're probably going to last forever. Very thick walls, good foundation, very, very well made. So an interesting fact here is when the dam was starting to be constructed, there was a public petition at that time. Not sure why it didn't happen earlier, but there's a petition wanting that dam to actually have a higher level in order to flood a larger area. They wanted a larger lake. And so Again, I'm not sure why it happened in that sequence, but the county board went for it, and they actually approved acquisition of additional property and making that the dam head higher. So that was pretty interesting as well. Again, just a little side note as far as Wood County parks. So WPA program provided 4,471 man months, not man days, but man months of labor for the entirety of that program, 1935 to 1943. So that is it's a large number of hours that were basically there to put people to job, employ people, but also to have these beautiful structures that are still very solid today. Another training program was, they called it on-the-job training, Public Law 346, and this was specifically looking at providing training for military veterans in 2 of the county parks. So it didn't say, I couldn't find out which projects they worked on, but it was a training program for some of the veterans in the area. 50s and 60s, Red Sands Beach House construction. This was one of the dredges. 175,000 cubic yards of silt was pumped out of that lake. Since then, we've had, I believe, 2 other larger scale dredgings. It's obviously it's a sand bottom. It's sand property out, sand country out there. 4 Mile Creek comes in from Portage County, which is, as you know, a lot of potato fields, cranberry fields. A lot of sedimentation comes down the 4 Mile Creek, and when it hits that slow-moving water in the lake, that's where it all dumps. And so there's really nothing we can do about it. It's just something over time. It's going to be a maintenance cost and issue. 1978, if you have never been here, this is quite an event, but that was the first state water ski show tournament that was hosted in Wisconsin Rapids at Lake Wazeecha. I believe there may have been a small break somewhere in there, but it's been pretty continuous since that point. And it is a very large event for the Wisconsin Rapids, Southwood County area. 1990s to present, shower building was constructed. This was the last park that had a shower building in the campground. Disposal site was acquired, and that was for future dredgings. 1994 was a huge year for Wood County, and it was a several-year process, but they did a large-scale hydraulic dredge. They actually set up a pipeline that went from the lake itself a couple miles down the road, and it all, they had a to and from pipe basically that exchanged sediment and water coming back and forth. So there was a very large scale. In addition to that, they did some improvements to the dam gates, as well as that's when they paved much of the walk trail that went around the lake and graveled the remaining portions of that. So it was a multifaceted project. So that's Southwood County Park. Powers Bluff County Park in Arpin, just down the road here. Very, I guess, you know, from all of the parks, obviously has probably the most unique history. And I'm not going to get into a lot of the history pre-Wood County ownership. There's a lot of good material out there. I'm not sure if you, any of you attended, but Robert Birmingham, he had a presentation. He has a book out, Skunk Hill. Very, very good book. Tells basically the whole history of the Native Americans in Wood County as well as the region, and specifically on Powers Bluff, or what is referred to as Skunk Hill. So I'm not going to get into a lot of that detail, more of when the Wood County acquired that property and kind of from that point. From this park map, you can kind of see, so this is the 160-acre parcel that we had owned for quite a while. We have added to that since then, 223 acres to the north. But this kind of outlines where those different significant areas are. So Tube and Ski Hill right here, but then on the southern slope, that is basically in the National Register of Historic, under the Historical Society. 80 acres of that, and that is primarily due to the Native American history at that location. So there's different Dance rings, if you've ever been up there, there's dance rings and there's some signage up there, but that's a very fascinating history as far as being a ceremonial area where Native Americans would actually come from not only Wood County, but from all over Missouri, all over the Midwest, basically. So 2 times a year they had very large ceremonies in May as well as in July. And so those are two times when, back when the railroad was very popular in Arpin, a lot of individuals actually came in on railroad at that time. So 1936 is actually when the town of Arpin deeded or donated 50 acres of property to Wood County for park purposes. And so if you can envision basically where the shelter building is and going all the way to the south to Bluff Road, that's basically the swath of 50 acres that was originally deeded to Wood County. And that's the location where the 2 cemeteries are located. There's one on top of the hill as well as on the bottom, as well as the dance rings up on top of the hill. Wasn't until 1947 where the Park Commission decided, you know what, we have a very attractive area for winter recreation. And that's when they decided that they wanted a long-range master plan at that time made for winter sports or winter recreation. And so that's when the Parks Commission presented a plan. With that, the county board was on board because they allowed purchase of 50 additional acres to the north of that 50-acre property, so creating a 100-acre park at that time. Basically where the tubing hill and the ski runs are located currently, that was all within that footprint. 1947, it did not take very long. Bulldozers actually started going down that northern slope and creating these ski hills. Tubing did not come into play till much later, but ski hills originally, that's when they started developing the different runs that they've got. January 22nd, 1948 was the ski hill officially open to the public, with over 200 skiers attending that first day. So, you know, I hear a lot of stories from individuals that used to ski up there, and there used to be a lot of use up there compared to today for skiing. Tubing today is kind of our big ticket. So, 1949 to 1950 is over a 2-year process. 49 is when the lower portion of the shelter building was finished, and then the upper and entire portion was completed totally in 1950. Very nice building. The lower portion currently we've got concessions, break room, rental equipment, skis and snowboards, and the upper portion is just fireplaces and picnic tables. So, and that is rentable throughout the summer months as well for different family events. Got a few older pictures that we were able to round up in our office here. So Sunday, February 4th, 1951 was the official dedication date of Powers Bluff as a winter sports park. I'm not sure, this picture is not from that day, but in this book of history, the history book that was put together, they state that 1,500 to 2,000 people were at that day. I have no idea, being February 4th, you know, I'm sure there was some snow on the ground. I'm not sure where people parked, but it would have been quite the sight to see that many people up on that hill. So, and just a few more pictures of some older skiers and what the shelter building used to look like. This individual right here is Ole Arneson, and he was very instrumental in pushing for the ski hill. He was actually, I don't believe he ever skied in the Olympics, but he was a qualifier for the Olympics, and he came back, and he was one of the very driving forces of developing a ski hill in Wood County. If you're familiar with the hill today, it's a little different. This is actually where the tubing hill is located now. So they did used to go down on the tubing hill side also. And This, I believe, is on the other side. It's hard to tell right there, but it almost looks like it's on the existing ski hill. There's been some contouring over the years, and there used to be a lot higher fall wall, ridge wall on the top here, and that's been over the years graded and different things like that. So, we also used to have a toboggan run, and so 1962, 60 acres east of the 100-acre park was donated by Lloyd Felker, and that was donated to Wood County. 1963, half mile, which is crazy. You think about a half-mile run, but half-mile toboggan run was constructed. 1,800 foot of steel track, and this is an older picture. Obviously, you can kind of see the track coming through, and an 800-foot landing area. So it wasn't straight down the hill, it kind of curved, and you can still see the footprint of that landing area if you walk out there. So this is a picture just from the other day, but this is a fireplace that they constructed right in the rock, and that was where they basically up top here where they started the line. And so I guess before going down the half-mile toboggan run, you could at least get a little warmth in your fingers or your toes or something, but I'm sure that fireplace probably didn't give off a lot of heat. 1963 was when the vault toilet was constructed. Again, over the years, we've kind of made some adjustments to these buildings. The whole inside is now remodeled, and it's pretty decent for a vault toilet anyways. It's still vault. And then 1977, the Potawatomi Nature Trail. Now that the 60 acres was owned, they had decided to put a nature trail that, parts of it's pretty easy walking, but part of it does actually go down the old toboggan run, and it's quite steep in some areas. So I kind of talked about acquisition of the property. So this is kind of a good layout of it. So the town of Arpin donated this section here initially, and then Wood County purchased this property, and then the 60 acres on the east side was donated by Lloyd Felker at that point. Just a few other items. So 1975, 70 acres of the eastern portion of park was designated as state natural area. And so that's how we still manage that portion today. It's a very hands-off management approach. Unless there's trees that go over the trail itself, what we try to do is just create an opening where people can still walk through it, push the wood to the side. But for the most part, and you can walk through that and see that quite readily, we do kind of let nature take its course in that area. 1978 was when the toboggan run closed, and in the book it says it was due to lack of use, and snow tubing actually began being allowed on the number 4 slope that same year. So I think it was kind of a transition event. Just talking to an individual that I used to work with, and he was working during that time when it was just ending. It sounded like, in his opinion, it was more the amount of maintenance that was required for it. So if they had a very nice base of snow and ice and everything like that, and you get one nice sunny day or some more warmer weather, all of your work kind of goes down the drain, and it was very maintenance intensive. So that was one of the reasons, I'm sure too, that they got away from it. 84, 1.5 mile cross-country ski trail was developed by the Wisconsin Conservation Corps. 2005, and this is the cover page for that, was when the long-range master plan was completed. And again, not going into a lot of detail because we do have some time restrictions here, but that was basically a result of Wood County looking at doing a timber harvest at Powers Bluff. And at that point, individuals from the Native American community, as well as individuals that were concerned about the environmental impact of logging, they came forward, and there was a petition, and there was a lot of different moving parts. And in the end, all of those individuals, all those groups came to the table, a common table, and were able to put together a long-range master plan. And so that's kind of what we're working off of right now, and that was included in that with our 2012 acquisition of the 223 acres to the north. Really trying to separate the different users out there, the recreational users, as well as the sensitive cultural and environmental resources up there. So again, we could do a whole presentation on that. Dexter County Park. So this is relatively a newer park for us. Again, Yellow River is the main water body that comes through. This is kind of a unique situation because not only were we interested as a county to develop a lake, but the DOT was actually interested in rerouting their Highway 54 corridor. And both entities kind of work together. You can't really see it, but the old road bed actually was south of the tracks, and then it would come to the north of the tracks, and it was kind of a funny footprint that it traveled. And so with that reroute, it actually worked well for both parties. It straightened out 54, but it also created a dike structure for the dam. And so they obviously had to work in conjunction with each other to complete that project. So 1957 is actually when the petition, public petition, was presented to the county board, and individuals were looking to create another park in the Dexterville area. They were looking at a larger water body in that area of the county as well. 1962, so it took 5 years of different processes and discussions, things like that, but that is when the county board ultimately approved 1,200 acres to be set up under the forest crop regulation in order to be eligible for outdoor recreation assistance program. And that was a state program, ORAP is what people call it. And that was a state program that if your property was under this forest crop regulations, there was a fair amount of dollars that was available for you. And in addition to that, there were also federal funds that were available as well. A lot of this park was actually established through, it was basically 25% county funds, 25% state funds, and 50% federal funds. So it was you know, if you're looking at different grants and different funnels of money for creating these types of programs or these types of parks, 25% of this park is, I mean, it's pretty low if you're looking at the grand scheme of things. 1967, this is their beach house, and this shows the park commission who was on board at that time. 1963 is when the lake bed clearing begins, and 1965 is when the dam and Highway 54 reroute was completed, and they started filling the lake for their first test. They actually had to go back and do a few tweaks to the dam gates themselves. Not sure what those were, but that was the first time that they actually filled the lake itself. Just a few of the buildings that were constructed over the years. 1967, the shower building in the campground. 1979, the shelter building, which actually originated as an open shelter, and after different user groups voiced their opinions, it was actually converted to an enclosed shelter. With the assistance of the Pittsville Lions Club, helped quite a bit on that project, and they continue helping out. 2012 is when we constructed our second shower building in the campground, and 2016 is actually when we sold our old, it was actually an old forestry building, maintenance shop, and that was right off of Highway 80 to the south of the tracks there. We basically outgrew that, and so that was the year that we constructed a maintenance building off of Highway 54, immediately across the entrance road to the main park on the west side, and also a equipment storage building as well. The last park that I'm going to be going through is the fourth of the the fifth of the 5 parks that we're going through, Nepco Lake County Park. Located in Wisconsin Rapids, and this property was actually donated by Nakusa Edwards Papers for the purpose of public recreation. And so You can kind of see the green outline. Basically, we have an entrance road, parking lot, a larger shelter building, boat landing, beach, and then a lot of trails in the park as well. We have cross-country ski trails as well as single-track biking trails or cross-country or snowshoeing trails in the winter months. Just some dates here. So 1976 is when Nakusa Edwards offers 125 acres for donation, and 1977 is when Wood County officially takes ownership of that property. 1978, the park opens to the public with a swimming beach and a boat landing. 1981, 1.5 mile cross-country ski trail opened that same year, as well as Highway 13 access. So the park used to be accessed by Highway 13 going right by it. Because of safety issues and things like that, that was closed down and a separate entrance road was constructed. 2005 is when the new shelter building was constructed here, and this is currently our only our year-round use shelter building that we have. Moving forward, Powers Bluff is one of the locations that we've identified where we would like to have our year-round use with heat and air conditioning, and we get a lot of use out of this building. Very, very popular for a variety of events, from weddings to community events and things like that. So that was a real quick snapshot of our Wood County parks. Some of the areas that I did not highlight, the disposal site, like I had mentioned, so that is open to the public, and it's basically open for hunting and trapping. People do go out there because it's a wide open area. They will train dogs and things like that out there as well. We also have a rifle range and an ATV intensive use area. And so those locations, rifle range is just outside of Rapids, ATV area is just west of Port Edwards, and so those locations are maintained by our department as well. And then, like I mentioned, the county forest property, and that's, again, probably another presentation, but that's about 38,000 acres of property that is managed for timber production primarily, but also for environmental protection and recreational opportunities also. So, all right, thank you.